It was a morning soaked in melancholy. The skies over Wagadu hung low, cloaked in thick gray clouds, like a nation weighed down by invisible burdens. President Ibrahim Traoré, clad not in the regalia of power but in plain, unremarkable clothes, walked the rain-damp streets alone. Fresh from a high-level meeting at the presidential palace, he sought solace in anonymity, moments to breathe, to reflect, to feel. Then destiny struck. As he passed a bustling local market, his eyes locked onto a frail figure huddled beneath a ragged blanket in the corner. The man's eyes were distant, his bones sharp against skin that had seen too many winters. Yet something about him tugged violently at Traoré's memory. He halted. His breath caught. It was Monsieur Pascal, his former mathematics professor. The man who once lit up lecture halls with wisdom and patience, now reduced to a shadow on the sidewalk. Forgotten. Alone. The president's heart clenched. Tears welled up unbidden. Memories flooded in chalkboard's formulae and a guiding voice that once helped shape a boy into a man. "Professor?" he called out, voice cracking. Pascal lifted his head slowly, as if rising through fog. For a moment, he squinted in disbelief. And then, recognition. "Ibrahim," he whispered. Traoré dropped to his knees, heedless of the dirt, the stares, the cameras that might be watching. "Why are you here?" he asked, trembling. The answer came after a long silence, heavy as lead. "Retirement left me with nothing." Pascal sighed. "My pension couldn't cover the bills. My family, they have their own battles. So I faded out. It was a punch to the gut." The president staggered emotionally, not physically. "Why didn't you come to me?" "I couldn't," Pascal replied, his voice fragile. "You're the president. I didn't want to be a burden." "You would never be a burden," Traoré said, clasping his mentor's worn hands, tears now streaming openly. "You were my compass. Without you, I wouldn't be standing here today." A crowd began to gather. Phones came out. But none of it mattered. What unfolded wasn't a political stunt. It was raw human heartbreak. "Let's go," said Traoré quietly, helping the old man to his feet. The professor stumbled. Pride clashed with relief in his eyes. Still holding his arm, Traoré whispered, "You shouldn't be here, not after what you gave us." But Pascal, ever the stoic, shrugged. "Life happens, Ibrahim. Sometimes there's no one to blame." No, Traoré cut in his tone steely. "There is someone to blame. Us. This country. This system." With one sharp motion, he waved over his driver waiting discreetly nearby. "Get the medical team. Now." They drove in silence, interrupted only by Traoré's gentle reassurances. "You're not alone anymore, Professor. Not while I draw breath." Pascal smiled faintly, tears slipping down his weathered cheeks. "You always were special, Ibrahim. I knew you'd change the world. I just never thought you'd come back for me." By the time they reached the presidential residence, the gravity of the moment had settled in Traoré's chest like an anchor. This was no isolated tragedy. It was a symptom of a deeper rot. And as he returned to the palace, Ibrahim Traoré made a silent vow. No teacher, no citizen who gave their life to this country would be left behind again. Back at the palace, President Ibrahim Traoré did not wait. Within hours, he summoned an emergency cabinet meeting. Around the grand table sat the Minister of Education advisors from the social sector and key members of his inner circle. His voice, still raw with emotion, cut through the tense air. "What happened? Today is not just a personal tragedy, it's a national disgrace. I found my own teacher on the streets, forgotten, abandoned. That is unacceptable." The room fell into stunned silence. No one dared speak. The president's words struck like thunder. We can no longer turn a blind eye to those who shaped the very minds that built this nation, he continued. If we can't honor the ones who gave us knowledge, then what are we building? The Minister of Education finally spoke up cautiously. Mr. President, we acknowledge the flaws in the pension system, but restructuring it will require time resources. Traoré's eyes flashed. Then find the damn resources. Reallocate budgets. Slash vanity projects. I don't want to hear excuses. I want solutions. And so, from the embers of outrage, a plan was born. Guardians of Knowledge, a national initiative to provide retired teachers with financial assistance, medical care, and new roles as mentors and cultural ambassadors. This isn't charity, the president declared. It's justice. Within days, the program moved from paper to action. Field teams were deployed to identify retired educators in distress. Media campaigns flooded the airwaves, reminding citizens that without teachers, there are no doctors, no engineers, no leaders. Monsieur Pascal was among the first to benefit. He received full medical attention, counseling, and a place in a dignified residence funded by the program. Shortly after, an invitation arrived, a ceremony honoring the inaugural guardians. Yet, for Traoré, this was just the beginning. That evening, long after the palace lights dimmed, the president sat alone in his office, surrounded by a mountain of policy reports. But his mind was elsewhere, still with Pascal, still on that cold street corner. Marie, his assistant, stepped in quietly with a cup of tea. "You're still working?" she asked, her voice gentle. He looked up, eyes tired but burning. "I keep thinking, how many more Pascals are out there? How many are we not seeing? You can't fix it all in a day," she offered. "But I can start," he said firmly. "And I will." Over the following weeks, Traoré launched an aggressive push to reform the country's entire social safety net. He assembled an unprecedented task force experts in education, healthcare, elder care, and pension reform. The mission was clear. "We will no longer treat our elders as shadows," he said during one landmark meeting. "They are the pillars beneath our feet." The result? A sweeping National Dignity Act, which guaranteed a minimum pension above the poverty line. Free health care access for all educators over 65 community hubs, where retired professionals could mentor youth scholarships in their names to continue their legacy. Weeks later, Traoré visited one of the new centers. He found Professor Pascal sitting in a sunlit garden reading. "Professor," he called out softly. Pascal looked up and smiled. "Ibrahim, you kept your promise." "I wanted to apologize," Traoré said, his voice cracking, "for not seeing your pain sooner." The old man shook his head. "It's life. Sometimes it moves too fast. People fall through the cracks." "But not anymore," said Traoré. "Not while I'm here." Pascal gently closed his book. "This book," he said, "is about gratitude. And I am grateful for you, for this moment, for the fact that I got to witness the seed I once planted grow into something so powerful." The president bowed his head, moved beyond words. That single sentence struck him more deeply than any accolade. As Traoré left the garden, another story began. This time with Fatou, a bright-eyed young woman who had traveled miles from Bobo Dioulasso. She carried more than a suitcase, she carried her mother's dream. Marie, her late mother, had once been a teacher too, and now, thanks to the Guardians of Knowledge initiative, Fatou had earned a scholarship named in her memory. She walked through the gates of the new National Innovation Center, where retired educators and new minds would meet to build a new Burkina Faso together. In the reflection of that glass building, Fatou saw herself, and behind her, a line of figures who taught, who gave, who were never supposed to be forgotten. When President Ibrahim Traoré arrived at the National Innovation Center, he was not greeted with fanfare or protocol. What he saw was far more powerful a living testament to a vision that had once seemed impossible. The air was thick with joy. Children ran among tents that displayed local inventions and sustainability projects. Elders exchanged stories under colorful canopies. Musicians played softly in the background. And in the center of it all stood Marie, his assistant and friend, her eyes brimming with tears as she managed the final touches of the celebration. Beside her stood Malik, the once feverish boy who had nearly died in a rundown clinic. Today, he wore a clean new sweater, a radiant smile, and held up a board filled with photos of community-led initiatives: healing, learning, building. Traoré stepped onto the stage, not in a suit, not in military dress, but in simple traditional Burkinabe attire as one of the people. He looked at the crowd, farmers, teachers, youth elders, and was visibly moved. "We are not here today," he began, voice trembling to celebrate statistics. "We are here to honor you, the builders of this nation, not with steel and cement, but with your minds, your sweat, and your dreams." A hush fell as he turned toward the front row where Monsieur Pascal sat quietly dignified, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Professor Traoré said, his voice cracking, "You were my guide, my compass. Without you, I would never have found the path I walk today. And I vow, before all of Burkina Faso, never again will we allow our teachers, our elders, our unsung heroes to be forgotten." The applause was thunderous. Many wept openly. Pascal slowly rose, nodded, and waved, his frail body lifted by the weight of a nation's gratitude. Traoré continued, "This center is not just a building. It is a beacon. Here, young scientists are creating solutions tailored to our soil. Here, farmers are learning how to feed their families sustainably. Here, legends like Professor Pascal are being celebrated for the legacies they've etched into our hearts." And then came Fatou, called up to speak. She hesitated just for a moment, then stepped forward with grace. In her hands, she held a weathered book. "My mother," she said, "always told me to fight for my dreams. She used to read me this book. Inside, on the last page, she wrote, 'Knowledge is the greatest inheritance we can leave.'" The audience erupted. Traoré embraced her tightly. In that moment, he understood this was the real success, not in legislation, not in applause, but in a young girl holding her mother's words like a flame. Far away across oceans in a brightly lit studio in the United States, the image of this moment played live. Former President Donald Trump, seated awkwardly during a broadcast, was asked once again about Traoré. "This guy," Trump muttered, then paused, uncharacteristically reflective. "He's something special. He's proving he can get things done. Maybe I underestimated him." The clip went viral. Across platforms and time zones, the world saw what Africa was becoming, not a continent of dependency, but of dignity. Not a land of need, but of new beginnings. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré's work did not pause for applause. Days later, in a remote village once forgotten on every political map, he met a girl named Mamadou. She wore a bright uniform fresh from the new education funding initiative born of land reform. In her hands, a small journal. "Mr. President," she said, voice trembling, "this is for you. I just wanted to show you we're using what you gave us to learn." Traoré knelt beside her, touched beyond words. He opened the notebook. Inside were handwritten stories, science notes, and a drawing of a classroom. "Mamadou," he whispered, "you don't owe me anything. You are the proof that when we give people the right tools, they can conquer the world." Later that evening, A journalist covering the event jotted the final lines in his notepad. Today in Burkina Faso, I saw the future of Africa, not an Africa defined by aid or pity, but one forged from memory, justice, and love. A continent where the past is honored, the present is empowered, and the future is fearlessly claimed. And as the sun set over Wagadu, casting golden light over the Innovation Center, President Ibrahim Traoré looked on not as a leader basking in praise, but as a son returning home determined to keep the promise. Never again will we forget the hands that built us.